Yeah, do some yoga. What's the first move in yoga?
What are the podcast stretches?
Podcast stretch of do yoga like
The
this.
subscribe stretch.
Just like this.
You are now listening to Mixmag on rotation, the world's dance music destination.
Hello and welcome to Mixmag's On Rotation podcast presented by Serato, the power of music. We are, of course, here live from our Brooklyn office. I'm Harrison.
And I'm Valerie, and I'm from LA, but I'm also in Brooklyn today. So exciting.
And for those that don't know, our On Rotation podcast is a weekly podcast where we discuss a variety of topics in dance music, from funny stories, controversial stories, and everything in between. And we also feature an artist interview. We've had some really awesome artists featured. What have been some of your favorites?
Some of my favorites, early ones for sure, the Black Madonna. We had Peggy really early on, as well as the Black Coffee. Some big names. Some other favorites I'm trying to think. Pig and Dan recently was cool one.
Amazing. They were so raw and real. You got to go check that episode out if you haven't already.
I love the one you did with Anna Luneau too, because it was such a fun time in her life when she was pregnant.
Yeah.
Just about to take a little maternity leave off of DJing and producing. What about you? What are your favorites?
All of the above.
All of them.
All of the above. Especially the Charlotte DeWitt one where I had to record it like 3 times because the recorder ran out of battery. Yeah, we run into a lot of issues, but we are of course here live now because this is our 50th episode, so it's a very special occasion. We've made it this far after a year of doing this, and it's been a lot of fun.
We've survived.
Yeah,
we survived. We done did it.
People listen, which is amazing.
You guys listen, and you're awesome for doing that. So thank you for doing that. We're so happy.
But our main goals for this have been really just to take everything we do with the magazine here and online with the website and put it into an easily digestible form with a video.
Yeah. I mean, nowadays people are on the go all the time, and obviously podcasting has become the kind of go-to way for people to digest what's going on. And we know that people who, love electronic music want to know all the fun things that are happening, what their favorite DJs are saying, what people are getting into. So it's been really fun to kind of put our own spin on giving you guys daily news and talking. And you know what also is really special, I think, about doing the podcast is that different stories come out from artists when you're talking to them. And, there's so many amazing features that have been written and obviously transcribed from actual audio interviews, but it's something very special to actually sit down and just have a conversation with someone who's a real human. And it's great.
I think that's the way we approach this. Is it's less of a Q&A and it's more of like, who is the artist? What is their personality like? It's hard to show that personality in a written feature, and I think a lot of people are really gravitating to this. So it's been really amazing, and thank you everybody for listening. We are on iTunes, we're on SoundCloud. Leave us a comment, leave us a message. It's on rotation. We also have a discount code through Serato. You go on the website www.serato.com. and use the code on rotation. That's one word for 10% off your full order. But now let's get into some more juicy stuff about dance music, our opinions on the scene right now. It's a really interesting time for dance music.
It always is, isn't it?
It's a powerful time, and especially now that we're approaching festival season, especially here in the United States. It's interesting to look back on like what are the artists that are being featured the most these days, and you feel a real power struggle between the legacy acts and the up and coming artists. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely feel that. I think especially in this time period that we're going through, maybe more so in the U.S. than anywhere else in the world. Kids are kind of over the big EDM boom and the guys that aren't really like innovating as much. And maybe those kids who also came in from the EDM names are now learning about, what's house and techno? These people have been around for a long time. So now what's old has become new again. And I think that has a lot to do with why we're seeing kind of people who have been around for years and years become like big headliner names again, which is awesome. It's great.
You remember that Dennis Ferrer interview he did, which is this quote will always stick with me. I'm in the middle of a conversation with Dennis Ferrer, and I'm like, well, you're a legend. What's it like to be a legend these days? And he's like, don't call me a fucking legend.
Don't call me that.
Don't call me a legend. I'm not a legend. I want to be relevant. And I feel like now these legends are more relevant these days than ever. Especially with like artists like Kerry Chandler and even Carl Cox, somebody who's been doing it for so long.
That reminds me also of something I remember that Scream said once, is that he kind of takes more pride in being somebody who never broke it like super big in one genre, in any one genre. Rather, instead, he's become like a very, well-respected on the top side of the medium spectrum across a bunch of different genres. And he has this ability to just kind of bounce from whatever he wants to whatever he wants. And he was like, honestly, I think that's more respectable, and I'm more proud of that than, saying that I dominated any one genre. And I was like, that's also a good way to look at it,
Yeah, I'm not sure there's
any
other artist who's really done that. I mean, maybe Scuba, who's really walked that line between all different types of genres. And I think if we talk about artists that are really hot right now, I feel like the ones like maybe the Avalon Emersons or even Mallgrab or Ben UFO, right? These artists, Ben UFO was on our recent cover last month, or this month actually. He's an artist that removes these genre barriers from his DJ sets, and people might be a little bit tired of the more focused DJs. In a way, right?
I mean, I think at this point, if you are a dance music fan, you know what you like, but at the same time, it's also nice to kind of be exposed to something new.
Yes, exactly.
And the DJs that do it well, are the ones that experiment and can kind of go across the board. So that's always cool.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to talk about that I think is really interesting now that we're talking about scene stuff, let's talk about festivals. The difference between, big festivals, monster names that I think host like hundreds of thousands of people every time versus these more boutique-y, smaller type festivals. Like, what's the preference? What do you think about both sides?
Well, I think Mixmag in general has really been like a guiding force in showcasing a lot of the boutique festivals that are really attracting a lot more people, which is interesting because people like them because there's not a lot of people. Do you know what I mean?
Right. The exclusivity factor.
Like our last year we named Festival of the Year was Houghton, right? And Craig Richards curated festival. And I feel like those styles of festivals are what's really just people have a lot more fun at those because you feel a little bit more free. You don't feel so congested.
True.
Glastonbury's not happening this year, so maybe in the UK or around Europe, people are thirsting for the more intimate festivals. And in the States, though, I don't know. I feel like in the States, it's always the big festivals that run everything,
Yeah, I have a feeling, I mean, I do think that there's kind of across the spectrum, it's kind of either or, right? Because at this point, again, going back to now that we've kind of gotten over the hump of maybe people just discovering what dance music is as an umbrella term, now they're like, okay, like I really like the sound of Dirty Bird Tech House, so I really only want to go see that. So then they go to, Dirty Bird festivals, and they have that option to be like, I don't want to listen to any of the other stuff, I just want to spend my whole weekend there. But then there is the other side where we look at like EDC, Ultras of the world, and they have anyone from the biggest of EDM headliners all the way to like the techno heads and like the underground like big names. So you really can be like, maybe if there's a fan out there who just loves everything across the board, they can see whatever they want just across one whole weekend.
Yeah, and I think the big festivals like EDC and Ultra they get more known for being this kind of EDM-y type festival, but then you got to really look a little bit deeper because they do have those underground talent that will kind of. And I feel like a lot of I've talked to a lot of DJs about this, and they see how the mainstream kind of is the gateway. Is the gateway drug to the underground?
I mean, it's always a good thing, I think, even though, a lot of the underground perspective is like, all right, selling out's bad, like blah, blah. But, it is great to expose people to what, more like the mature side of what dance music can be and something that you can listen to, when you're not trying to headbang and rage. It's something you would listen to when you're an adult and you would still enjoy it. I do think there is like that silver lining of, okay, maybe we should expose them. And, the other interesting thing that we've noticed in these kind of like big festival names is that they've both introduced an underground like subsector, right? Like Ultra has Resistance, which is very popular worldwide, and EDC has this more underground, subsector that they've introduced as well. That's called Factory 93. So there's definitely interest, which I think is cool. But of course, electronic music as a whole is very divided within itself. So
100%.
Yeah.
And now let's share a little bit about ourselves, because we've been doing this podcast for a year, and you probably don't know much about us personally, but it's interesting to see where we're coming from, because we're both U.S. based. I'm Brooklyn, she's L.A. But what was your first festival that you went to?
Ooh. Yeah, so I obviously born and raised in California. So I think that my first festival that I ever went to was one in San Francisco called Outside Lands. I went, I was still in high school. I remember it had to be my first festival because I didn't really know what the festival experience was like at that time. And San Francisco is such an amazing place. It's full of like people who are like have this great freeform spirit and just love, and they've had like a long history with music and
the rave scene.
Yeah, exactly. And like, 70s, 80s, all that stuff. So Outside Lands is a great one. It's a little bit of a mixed genre festival. I don't really remember seeing much dance music, to be honest. I remember seeing a lot of bands. Like Phoenix was the one that I like walked away from that festival being like, I've never heard of this band before. They're amazing. So that was for sure one of my favorite and first festival experiences. What about you?
It was actually one up here, Northeast Coast, called Camp Bisco. I know a lot of people know about Camp Bisco. It's kind of was crazy Wook type festival.
Wook. Yeah. What's the definition of Wook?
It was the Wook festival. If you know what Wooks are, then you know what Camp Bisco is. But there was a lot of cool stuff. Like I feel like I remember Bonobo, and it was Bonobo on a small side stage doing a little live setup by himself. And I was just so fixated on this because from my perspective, I mean, I think this might be for a lot of like the U.S. audience in general, is like you're exposed to something that's not what you don't know what else is really out there. You know what I mean? Like I didn't know Bonobo even existed,
Yeah. What is a Bonobo?
What is that,
Yeah.
And then you hear these like, it's like got that same steady rhythm, but it doesn't have those really harsh sounds. And it makes me think of this quote. I have a t-shirt from this Big Up magazine. I don't know if anybody knows about Big Up magazine. It's a magazine based in Brooklyn a long time ago. And they have a quote on the back from LB, who you should probably know who LB is. And the quote is, "It's all about hard grooves rather than hard noise." And that's something that kind of just like resonated with me a lot moving forward in my exploration of more dance music. But back then it was like bass nectar, and like,
which I do think was interesting too. I mean, both of us kind of coming in as young American ravers, I guess, if you call us ravers back then. We both came in through more of like the bass music side.
Yeah, for sure.
Which I think is interesting. Because I mean, coming from the West Coast, there is like a big, huge bass music influence. So it's not like as surprising, I think, maybe for people watching or listening for me. But for you, maybe they're like, oh wow, he came in through bass nectar and all that stuff too. Because I remember, I don't know if you like recall maybe like the first time you heard like a dance music tune that you were like, whoa, like what is this? Mine actually.
Yeah, what is yours? I know mine for sure.
Yeah, mine was actually one by Zed's Dead, which is so funny. Like I remember being like, I'm sure I'd heard other electronic music before that, but like not so vividly in my memory.
I think I know you're talking about blue. What?
Yeah, I forget
what is that early Zed's Dead track?
It was one of the really big ones
Yeah.
in way back in the day. And I remember I was like, a friend had sent it to me, and I was listening, of course, on like a terrible laptop. And I was like, wait, like I think I should like pick up some headphones and like actually listen to this. And I had that whole experience of being like, this is so new and different for me that I really want to like hear the actual details in the song.
Right.
Which is cool. That was like for sure something that I always will remember being like, okay, this is interesting and capturing my attention in a different way.
For me, it was probably something more a little crazy, bassy like that. But I'm talking about maybe the first dance track, like first house track that like really got me into like exploring the history of dance music. And if you're following Mixmag, you know we are obsessed with the history of dance music. If you want to know anything about the deep history of house or techno or any other genre, you can find it on Mixmag for sure. And the one that really stuck with me was Frankie Knuckles' The Whistle Song. And that song will always be like, I mean, you have your like desert island tracks, right? Like, what's your desert island tracks? Like The Whistle Song, I could listen to that
like the one that you would bring
for
and couldn't
year.
Listen to anything else. Yeah.
Like that's the one. There's no doubt about it. And but I mean, then you dig a little bit deeper, and then I got really into the rave scene here in New York. And right now, you should check out an article I wrote about the Brooklyn scene. It's called Brooklyn Rising, and it showcases how booming the club culture is here, whereas compared to maybe London, where club culture might be hurting a little bit more with closure of clubs and stuff like that. And then we also know about the West Coast scene because we just published an article about the bass music scene in the West Coast, which I thought was really interesting. And it really does revolve around the festival culture over there.
It does. I think that's an interesting topic we should for sure talk about, kind of like the difference in like club culture versus festival culture.
Right.
You know, of course, as you just mentioned, the West Coast very much is dependent upon and I think strong in festival culture. We're obviously known for like Coachella, Outside Lands, like I mentioned, those kind of like big outdoorsy things.
Yeah.
You know, we do Crossed twice a year, actually, not just once a year. And we like to take advantage of the fact that we have good weather and and we like to be outside, so why not? But I do think that's our strength over in the West Coast. You know,
I think that's interesting though. I'll stop you there because with other cities around the world, like Berlin, you know, known for club culture.
Yeah.
It's probably the weather is shit. Yeah.
So you want to be inside.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You know,
so
London, same type of thing.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. And same thing here.
And
you know,
New York
it is nice
too.
half the year, but you know, it's not very
Most
nice.
of the time it's not that nice. So
yeah, exactly. So I do think that has actually surprisingly a lot to do with the way that, you know, whether it's club culture or festival culture that you kind of thrive in. Because like LA has good clubs, and I know there's some like big ones popping up now in San Francisco and San Diego, but it's always kind of been not quite as strong as it is in those other cities that you mentioned. And, you know, we're working on it. We've talked a lot about the concept of having an LA nightmare and strengthening our understanding of how nightlife culture can be beneficial to a city financially, economically, all that stuff.
I think the night mayor concept in general is something that's really strong right now. And it's really, I mean, New York just got their first night mayor. But it's really, I don't really see it working so much in a lot of areas. I mean, London is trying to get it on track. I think Berlin is probably the one where it's working the best. Berlin and Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Because Berlin, you have that whole thing with the government investing $1 million into the club community to help sound restriction issues there. And then in Amsterdam, they're handing out 24-hour licenses, you know, which are super exciting. And we'll see how it works in New York. But LA has yet to really jump on that. And
I think it has a lot to do with just from the top down, right? Like all the way to the government organizations and the people in power. It just takes a mentality change of thinking about how, like I said, nightlife and people who love going out on the weekends, which is an international thing. You know, people love going out everywhere. But it just takes time for the people at the top, at the power positions to understand how that can be so beneficial, and that is a cultural benefit. If your city is seen as somewhere that is a destination, a tourist destination for nightlife, for music. And I think we're getting there. I think it's hard to deny at this point, you know, like people travel to LA all the time, to Southern California to come check out the festivals. And when they're there, they probably also want to go see some bars and nightclubs. So I think we're getting there slowly but surely. But it is for sure kind of a struggle. But at least there are other cities for us to kind of look towards at this point and be like, look how well it's doing over there. And then 100%. Hopefully maybe in a year or two, we'll get there. Get there.
I mean, club culture around the world is really strong, and you see the emergence of new markets in Asia. Asia is really still the untapped market for a lot of dance music. And in a lot of ways, the U.S. is too. And so that's our role here at Mixmag, is to really just showcase the whole global scape. And we are here in the States, and we are showing everybody here what's really good. We got the lab here in Brooklyn. We do it right here. We got the lab in LA. Literally right there. Happens right here. And then we got the lab in LA, which is going on really strong. And it's a very exciting time. So
very exciting.
Be sure to check out On Rotation, though, because we're doing this weekly. We have some really awesome interviews coming up. And be sure to just dig into the back catalog of it, because...
there's some really timeless interviews in there. It's
seriously
been really fun. I want to know, actually, what's maybe your favorite interview that you've ever done?
My favorite interview that I've done, I mean,
there's a lot.
It's hard, but... my most recent one with Pig and Dan, I'm talking
about that one a lot.
I can't get that one out of my head because it's recent and because they were so raw and real. They were talking about drug addiction because Pig has struggled with it, and he's been sober for 9 years now.
They're also such a funny bunch. Like they're just so like, you really are in the story when they talk about them. I feel like they're like, They bring you there with
100%.
you, and you're like, wow.
and I'm trying to think what other one. I feel, and the first one with the Black Madonna had to be another one because she also speaks her mind.
Yeah,
and maybe I'll throw in Dennis Ferrer in there too because these people,
a legend, but don't call him a legend.
Right? Don't call him a legend.
Yeah,
Dennis, you're not a legend. You're relevant. And he is
so
as relevant as ever.
But still legend.
But I like the more raw and real,
For sure.
the ones where, and Eats Everything, he was another one that was just like not afraid to really say any, he could say whatever he wanted, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
And your favorite interview must be?
Ooh, it's hard, honestly. I think the name that I always kind of come back to is Busy P.
Oh, yeah?
It was like one of the first ones. I think it was still that moment of like, or that mentality of being like, okay, like still kind of nervous going into this. Like, am I recording everything right? Like, is everything going well? And then like, Busy P is just like such a name. Like, even though he's not necessarily like a huge like headliner name, he's like one of those people that when you work in the industry a little bit longer, you're like, whoa, like this guy has had so much influence. Yeah, working with Daft Punk and Justice. So going in, and like that's the music like I grew up with. I know like we've talked about this before on the podcast. Like we both kind of grew up in the blog house era.
Yeah, for sure.
For me to have like sat in the room with him and I was like, okay, like he could really either be like, this girl knows nothing. Yeah. Like she's so young. Like I don't want to talk to her about anything. But he was just so open and really actually I remember like he gave the impression he was like, oh, thank you so much for like knowing so much about my history. And I was like, of course, like I grew up with this stuff. Like thank you so much for telling me about anything. Yeah. And he was very candid talking about like what it was like working with the Justice guys when they were not even Justice yet, like helping them come up with the name and helping Daft Punk throughout their whole career and like living the rock star tour life, which like I'm sure he had many more stories he didn't even tell. But that's like one of the coolest things about like, getting to do this job for sure. And I can't believe we're at 50 episodes.
50 episodes.
Here we are.
50
Yay.
episodes. And you know what, Val? Here is to 50 more. It's interesting because we don't get to do this together very often.
We don't get to do the real high five very often.
She's in LA. I'm here in Brooklyn. We do it over the airwaves. But this is a very special episode, so we thought we would bring it to you live and direct where we're here together.
You are now listening to Mixmag on rotation, the world's dance music destination.
I'm here with our very special guest. I've got the trio that is known as the Glitch Mob. Hey, guys.
Hello.
Hey,
hi.
I guess to start, before we get into things, I'll have you guys each do a little intro so people can kind of recognize your voices if we're only on audio. So please tell me who you are.
This is Ed, a.k.a. Edit.
This is Justin, a.k.a. Beretta.
This is Josh, a.k.a. Ua.
Awesome. I'm so excited to have you guys here. Obviously, a longtime fan and friend of you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, and I know that this is a super exciting time in your guys' career. There's been a couple exciting times throughout your guys' prolific career, but I want to kind of, we'll start from the very beginning. I know you guys have been together as a group since 2006. Is that right?
Yeah, roughly, yeah. It's been about 10 years now.
Yeah, and so here in 2018, I thought it was interesting. I was like looking back on the discography. It marks the 10-year anniversary of your guys' kind of like first releases, like mixtapes and remixes. So I'd love to kind of just dive in straight there and say like, how does it feel now looking like where you guys are right now, looking back at yourselves as artists back then, like 10 years ago? It's crazy, 10 years ago.
It is crazy. Yeah. And it's cool to think about. Music feels like a log of where we were as people and how we've grown as artists, and can go back and think about what we were doing at the time that we were writing all the different stuff, especially, the first album, Drink the Sea, for us was very much of a diary piece that was us really attempting to put our hearts out on the line and what that felt like. So it is very nostalgic and a trip down memory lane to go back and listen to all of the discography, which I've been doing a lot lately, just as we've been releasing new music and going back in and hearing everything.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like there's moments doing the same where I'm like, wow, I don't know how we did that or where that came from, but it's still exciting. It's still refreshing to go back into those old songs and hear and feel those moments and, like relive them and be a bit like in awe of our own selves and everything. So
yeah, it's a little surprise from your past self, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a little. It's like a message in a bottle from previous to present self.
It's a great analogy. So if you guys will humor me, let's go all the way back to the beginning. I'm curious. I don't actually even know the story of how you guys all met and kind of came together as a group, and the rest is history, I guess. But take me back there.
Yeah, we were really friends first, and we were DJs Most people know us more as a band or a live production group, but we were in the early days of laptop DJs when everyone else was playing CDJs at the time, or even vinyl, and we were playing off laptops. And we all became friends through music, through the West Coast music scene, through Burning Man, through Low End Theory and stuff like that. And one day we got a gig, and we decided to just perform together because we were touring around as DJs individually, and it was so much fun to play and have the dynamic of multiple people on stage and connecting our computers. We thought, wait, let's do this. But we never really sat down and thought, let's form a band, and there were other people involved. So it was more of a crew affiliation at first, but everything felt right and started to take off and move towards wanting to create individual music. But it really started off just as a passion project for the love of music, and the love of performing together on stage is really what bonded us initially.
Very cool. And you guys are all from LA, right?
No.
Oh,
I'm from New
wrong?
Orleans originally. And
Okay.
Ed's from Boston.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Just ended up in LA eventually.
Yeah, I actually personally, I went to school at USC, and yeah, so that's kind of like how I made my way out to Los Angeles. But yeah, I guess like we all kind of officially met, I guess, out. My first time at Burning Man was, I guess, when we first met, which was probably 12 or 13 years ago.
And Burning Man was not cool at that time. It was definitely
it wasn't.
something that weird hippies did.
Yeah.
Now it's kind of cool.
Yeah,
but
now it's like a very cool thing, but back then it was just like, some like weird thing that happened in the desert and had like a very negative stigma attached to it. But
You had
we
to
didn't care.
really want to go
Yeah.
to Burning Man.
Yeah, we didn't care. We absolutely loved it. And I basically put out this message on this social media message board thing called tribe.net, which was essentially Facebook for, new school West Coast spiritual hippie types. And
That exists.
and I was like, hey, I'm going out to Burning Man for my first time. Down to play some music, whatever. And somebody from Justin's camp, Justin was the music director / curator of this Burning Man camp called Nexus, which was one of the few sound system camps at the time. Now there's like a bazillion sound system camps at Burning Man, but this is like a very big deal because, not only was Justin like kind of the main music curator at this camp, the camp also happened to be one of the rare camps that had a turbo sound. And the music that Justin was curating was very unique to Burning Man. At that point in time, it was very much, desert breaks a la, Adam Freeland and Freak Nasty in their heyday. Like that was the sound. It was like pre-dubstep and all that kind of stuff. And Justin and his whole posse, they were just like, having people play like really crazy left field IDM.
like IDM and experimental Aphex
Total
Twins.
Justin style in classic Justin fashion, just like all like the weirdo music out there. And obviously had me play. And Josh was part of this camp next door, right next to Nexus, called El Circo, which was where Bass Nectar was staying and stuff before Bass Nectar is who he is now today. And that was like the camp. And Josh was very deeply involved in all that. And
Totally. And Burning Man for us was a place to go and kind of like just experiment and try new music. And the kind of ethos of being out there at that time, at least within like the music side of Burning Man, was very much like, how can you like out head fuck somebody else with like crazy music? Like what is gonna like really melt the people at Burning Man? Like that was really the goal. It's just like
Be as weird as possible.
yeah, exactly. because
yeah.
it was very welcomed out there.
Yeah.
And there was no like, oh well, this is not dancey enough, or this is not this enough for this camp. It was just like, anything goes. So that's really where we cut our teeth in really experimenting with making music and just not having any guidelines. And we would just create weird stuff and bring it out there. And, it was so welcome,
Yeah. So I would like to also then dive into the fact that you're talking about like these kind of weird and out there musical beginnings that you guys had. Obviously, Glitch Mob has a very signature sound at this point. I'd love to talk about, like across the spectrum of electronic music, you guys are very unique in that, you're hard to pinpoint. You're electronic, but you're also rock. You're a band, but you guys are also producers and DJs. Who are some of the musical inspirations that kind of brought you guys together once you decided to become a unit as the Glitch Mob?
Sure. It was funny. One of the very first articles that was written about us, we did a show in San Francisco at Mighty, and we had Flying Lotus was opening, and there's a group called Laser Sword at the time, and Epcot and Sava. Epcot's over there right now, James.
That's right.
Yeah.
Was Philo on that?
Yeah, Philo.
Oh, damn, that's
Steve,
right.
Steve was playing that show. It was the very beginning of all of this stuff.
That's so crazy.
Someone wrote an article about it afterwards, and they said something to the effect of like, they're taking laptop music and making it fun and bringing a party element to it, because laptop music was really very intellectual. It was chin scratchy, but we always liked the technological side of things. For us, it was always a combination of art and technology. But so there was breaks, and then there was we had intellectual chin scratch music, and we merged the two. But really, there's a backbone of hip hop to the whole thing, and there wasn't really a lot of dance music that also had a hip hop tempo. So we would mix in Missy Elliott acapellas, and some of Ed's first tracks that I ever heard were cut-ups of Jay-Z and Timbaland and stuff like that. So we would mishmash that West Coast hip-hop swag with really crazy, glitchy cut-up laptop tricks, and that was the nexus of the whole thing, which really evolved. And you can still feel the backbone of hip hop in the whole thing, and the backbone of drum and bass and jungle. And that's the other thing, we all come from bass music, so it was the merger of those two that I think really set the whole thing off.
Yeah, the current sound of the Glitch Mob was something that we almost kind of stumbled upon and didn't intentionally, go this kind of like epic, over the top, grandiose thing. It's just kind of what was just evolving and coming out of us.
Progression, natural progression.
So it's interesting to talk about these old kind of like IDM weirdo days with, cut up hip hop acapellas and things like that. When you listen to the Glitch Mob currently, like if you put on like, our last record, Love, Death, Immortality, you would maybe not necessarily get that sense that are where our roots were.
I love that you guys are bringing up this thing about how hip hop was actually part of the backbone of your guys' like first inspirations, because I've actually never thought about it that way. And the thing that always comes up, at least in the Mixmag world, is talking about this super unique West Coast sound that, all these artists that kind of are pioneering the bass music world are from the West Coast of the US. So can you guys talk a little bit about what you think maybe exists here that makes that sound so special, and like just the West Coast a home for that sound? That makes sense?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think there's a culture around bass music here too. So growing up listening to hip hop, and I grew up in a little town north of Santa Barbara called Goleta, and it was all about hip hop and punk rock. That was and metal. That's what I grew up on. And so there's an element of that. We're in the town where Sublime comes from. There's Dr. Dre is here, and there's a lot of we're proud of that. So that was what we listened to growing up, and I think having that be the backbone of everything, and then mixed with the bass music culture. I mean, artists like Tipper, Bass Nectar, other artists that are really taking from the gnarled bass of jungle and drum and bass, which eventually became dubstep. But there's a natural merger, and there's a sort of reggae backbone of the whole thing too, and with DJ culture. But it's very much not from the trance techno lineage, the Euro side. It's sort of proudly West Coast vibe.
That makes sense. You've answered the question that I've always been wondering about here at Mixmag. I also want to talk about the Glitch Mob's really strong connection to technology. I know you guys are obviously producers and very well versed in music technology.
Nerds.
But
let's be
nerds, yes, very, very nerdy.
You can say it.
But also in your guys' live setups, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But do any of you guys have like a specific background or a deeper connection to technology in the world of it? Like how did that become such a big part of the Glitch Mob story?
Well, I think the three of us, we're all producers who are not lifetime musicians. We're not lifetime guitar players, piano players, anything like that. So at least for us, I think we've always really just kind of like used music technology I always like to say, kind of just like bend it to our will, so that in the studio, we can realize our creative vision. That's really what it's all about. That's what the Blade essentially is about. None of us can shred guitar or piano or anything like that, but we can shred the Blade. We built that. It's our custom instrument, and we know how to play that with the best of them. And I think that's really what it's always been about since day one. We've always been really fascinated about music technology and always pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Even when Justin said, we were there at the beginning of the early heydays of laptop DJing. That was just another thing. I think it was why DJ on a pair of CDJs when, with a laptop, so much more was possible. Mm-hmm. So I think that was really just kind of like always the ethos in what we do with the Glitch Mob. And even to this day, still constantly trying to use music technology to our advantage to, try to write music and realize, our message and our vision in a way that we haven't before, really.
Yeah, and it's really like, for us, the technology is meant to get out of the way so that we can perform our music and we can write music, and everything we do, we're products of the fact that music technology is here to make music writing easy for people that can't actually necessarily play the piano in a classical fashion. So we are products of that. Yeah.
The modern artist.
Yeah, but it's really about it's about the music. So, and we're not afraid to use any tools that are available that will let us just tell our story, get up there and play. But it's a very exciting time for that, and also just the way that music technology can get people into playing music much quicker, because in the West we think that, I can't play music, I can't sing, and I grew up thinking that I'm not a musician, but I was more of a computer nerd. But really, I came into music through the computer and through the lens of technology. So it's allowed me to express myself creatively in other ways.
Yeah, it's kind of like life hacking the creative process. For so long, like it used to be with music technology, that like knowing how to produce on a computer was this super sacred, like taboo thing that like all the drum and bass producers like kept guarded super close to their heart, and you kind of had to like be down and in the inner circle with them to like figure out how to use like a EMU 6400 or whatever. But now all the knowledge is so readily available on YouTube and everything, and that's really a beautiful thing. It's really like, when you have creative ideas that you're really trying to get out. I think like the quickest and most direct way to get there is really what we've been trying to do this entire time. Just make our lives as easy as possible in the studio with technology. So.
Yeah, make your own. Make it your own completely.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And speaking of that, let's talk about this upcoming very exciting news. There's a new album on its way, See Without Eyes. I know it's been a couple years since your last one, 2014, Love, Death, Immortality. I would love to know, walk me through the mindset, I guess, of how it works. Putting the album out there, you guys do a tour, then you have to come back and be like, all right, what are we gonna work on next? What kind of inspirations do you bring with you, I guess, heading into this new album now that it's completed and ready for the world? Walk me through that.
Well, I guess the way that we approach the creative process, I don't know. I guess maybe it's like a little unconventional than the way that it's done now. Obviously, we are electronic artists. We're an electronic band, and yes, we approach, I guess, like album writing cycles much more the way that a traditional band would, as opposed to like electronic artists nowadays, where they're essentially on endless tour. Yeah. That's not really what we do. We also. I guess like we don't really like approach the creative process like with like the strategic mindset that a lot of these like young entrepreneurial EDM producers and DJs do. Like we don't approach things from the standpoint of like we need like an amazing cosign or like like a really killer collab or feature because that's gonna make our thing go viral or propel us to, I don't know, XYZ dimension. Mm-hmm. That's not really what we do. We always set forth to really try and like write music from the heart. And everything really just comes from, the emotions and the stories that we're trying to tell. And, we really always head into every record with no agenda. We never like go into records being like, we need a hit, and until we have a hit, we're not going to put this out. That's not really how we operate. I think everything really comes from like where we currently are as human beings and as brothers, and what we're trying to say to the world, what we're feeling, and how we're trying to just like connect with human beings and mankind itself, really.
Yeah, music it's a pretty mysterious process. In a way, the music writes us, it writes through us. So it's our job to really just get out of the way and see what comes out. And this is a result of that. The new album is a result of that process, which took about 2 years to get there. And we had written about 25 sketches. So we start with a skeleton of a song, and then we boil it down. And there's a lot of trial and error until everything feels just right. And a lot of people ask us, they're like, wait, there's 3 of you. Why the hell does it take so long? But in fact, it's the opposite, because now we have 3 very particular picky artists and it has to pass through all of us. Yeah. So if one person doesn't like a thing, that's no good. Right. Unless the other 2 people really like it, then you can veto. So there's a sort of there's a scorched earth policy. So like once you hand off something to someone else, that's just how it goes. So we have our creative dynamic, but everything flows with 3 people because it can't really stalemate. So there's a lot of trying new ideas and then not liking it. But what we ended up with those 11 songs started off as 25 that were then whittled down. Then we added a couple, and there's a lot of morphing. So a lot of the songs you hear started off as another song, or the vocals came from somewhere else and we changed the tempo. In fact, the very first single we dropped, How Could This Be Wrong, that was a song that we had completely nixed and we didn't like anymore. And then I think Ed had an idea at one point. He's like, wait, what if we just bring this back and change the tempo down a couple? And then we thought, wait, this could work. We brought in a vocalist, and then it melded like that. But it's really more like birthing a whole world for us, because the visuals, the show, all of the stuff goes along with it. And we're searching for some cohesiveness in the whole thing. It's a world for people to get lost in. So it takes a long time to have the whole story feel just right and to have all the details line up like that.
And so, I mean, obviously people haven't heard the album yet. If you had to kind of give almost like a brief, like as if you were reading a book and got a little bit of a brief of what the story is, what would you tell people?
Vibes.
Just straight up vibes. That's it.
Well, I think for the Glitch Mob fans out there, I think the best way to kind of sum it up would be, if you took Drink the Sea and you took Love, Death, Immortality and
had a baby.
Yeah, you had a baby with it, and this is just kind of like the next evolution of those 2 stories,
Makes sense. Sounds exciting. Tell me now about some of the collaborators that you guys have brought on board. I know one of the recent singles was with an artist named Elohim, which I know you guys are really excited about. Maybe just start from there and tell me how you guys found her and how that worked out working with her.
Yeah, she came through from Kev, right? Yeah. Yeah, she was found by our manager, Kev, and he's like a very, very picky manager when it comes to working with people. And when he brought her on board, for him to manage her and everything, we checked out her music and everything, and we were just super stoked. And got her in the studio, and instantly it was just like magic. She just is she's incredible, special human, kind, very, very artistic. And it just really resonated with our style and our process and the way that we are. And I don't know, it just was like such an obvious match. And
the way we usually like to work is we don't really want to manage the creative process. We'll just give her the song. We say, that's it. We don't even tell her what it's about or anything, because we have a story. For us, maybe the song is about triumph or something like that. But it's the way that we like to react or have a pure reaction. And what she just got into the vibe of the song immediately, which is is rare. Sometimes people go back and forth, but with her and her natural voice, just it came through and it gelled pretty much instantly. And,
Amazing.
She has a really cool live show as well. She's going to be coming on tour with us. So
Yes, I saw that. Very
moment.
exciting. And then I know there's also an upcoming remix from Rez, which is an interesting kind of combination. You guys obviously have been making, I guess, like pioneering this genre for a while, and she's, I guess, like the rising star of the same spectrum.
Totally.
So what is it like for you guys kind of hearing her music and then coming together with her now working on a remix?
Yeah,
It's
we were
so
super
cool.
stoked. Yeah, I mean, I think me and Justin first heard about Rez a while back, and we were like, man, have you heard this girl? Like, her music's incredible. It's a nice take on what's currently happening in electronic music. You know, she has that, you know, obvious, like, current electronic music sound, but she took a really cool spin with it and making a lot of this kind of like slow 4-on-the-floor rhythms and
yeah, and it has attitude, which we love.
yeah, the attitude, and it's very sexy, but it's intense and it hits hard, and I don't know, it was a refreshing spin on like a current state of music. You know, she wasn't, you know, regurgitating the same thing that a lot of people do. So yeah, we got super inspired by her music, and yeah, when Justin reached out to her to do a remix and she was on board, we were just very, very pumped.
Yeah, she really loved the Elohim song. The funny thing, in fact, first she said no, but we had been chatting for a while because we've been DJing her songs in our DJ sets, and she's super friendly and such a kind person. And reaching out to people to do remixes, I sent her the record and she wrote back and she said, I don't know, I'm just so busy, I'm getting ready for all this stuff. But then she heard the Elohim track and she was like, wait, I changed my mind. Send me the stems right now. So I went on Dropbox, and 10 minutes later I sent them to her, and she did the remix like that night, and then probably over 2 days and just sent it back. She caught a vibe and ran with it. I mean, she's a true artist in that sense, that it wasn't overthought.
Very talented.
Yeah, she's very talented. So yeah, it's very fun for us to collaborate with her, and there's a natural a Venn diagram of vibe overlap there with her and everything she does.
Vibe overlap. I like that.
You can take that one.
Okay, I want to talk about the next kind of element, which is the live show. Obviously, once See Without Eyes comes out, you guys are going to go on tour and show the world what it sounds like. And I know that you guys put a lot into the live show. Obviously, you mentioned the blade that you guys created. Maybe for people who don't know what it is or aren't as familiar, could you guys give like a little brief of what the blade even is, and then also how it will be updated for the future, if you can tell?
Yeah, the blade is our custom instrument that we perform in on stage. It's also our live production as well too, but yeah, it's something that we built for the last tour cycle, and this current iteration we're kind of calling it like Blade 2.0. So it's the new, bigger, badder, meaner, more high-tech version of what the blade is. The blade is essentially almost like an extension, or like the fourth member of the Glitch Mob, or the third limb of each of us, so to speak.
I like that.
It's our sword that we go to battle with every night.
Nice.
And yeah, it's amazing. I think people should come out and experience it. You know, we going back to the whole conversation of music technology, the blade is essentially like, you know, that is the culmination of many years of us, yeah, basically just being totally hyped and like wrapped up in music technology and how to perform our music. You know, oftentimes when you see someone with a laptop on stage, you know, there's like a long running joke of like, oh, maybe that guy's up there surfing the internet and stuff. And a very long time ago, like pre-Blade era, you know, we decided to tilt our instruments towards the crowd. You know, we used to have these touch screens called lemurs, and they were these instruments that came out before the iPad, and obviously when the iPad came along, they went out of business. But you know, we've been tilting our instruments towards the crowd for many years to essentially break down that barrier and be transparent with the crowd, basically saying like, hey, we're up here playing as much stuff as like 3 people can play live.
Yeah.
And the blade is essentially just kind of like, you know, essentially like the next evolution of that. You know, like the crowd can actually see what's going on up there. If we mess up, you know, they can see, and it's audible, you know. And yeah, you know, it's really just it's our Excalibur, you know.
I like that. There's very much a personality behind the blade, for sure.
There is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we like performing our music more like a band. When, you know, there's these huge drums that are influenced by Japanese taiko, and the idea is to really have the energy of a band playing, but the music is all strictly electronic, because, you know, sometimes if you go and you see a show and there's a band playing an electronic song, unless they're really good, it's kind of that song, but it's also not. So there's that weird uncanny valley. We want to have the precision sound of mastered electronic music, but just being performed live.
Amazing. Well, it sounds very exciting. I can't wait to see it out on tour. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I'm really excited. Be sure to grab the Glitch Mob's album, See Without Eyes, out on May 4th.
Thanks for listening to Mixmag on Rotation. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll be back soon with more buzz from the world of dance music. Stay locked. This podcast was produced by Full English Post.